Welcome to Hired the Podcast. Today I have with me Michael Sullivan from Miller Resource Group. Michael's a senior executive recruiter here, specializing in industrial technology and automation. And I was refreshing my memory before we started. I asked Michael how long he's been here. He said he's been annoying people here at Miller Resource Group for over 6 years now.
Yes.
Sully, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Mike, one of the reasons that I was excited to talk to you today for this, because I think there's a lot of people out there that could benefit from hearing your story, because one of the reasons I think you've been so successful is the investment you've made in really becoming a part of your industry, becoming a part of that community. And I think it's because years ago, you decided to make the investment of time and effort by going out to not only trade shows, but going to conferences and sitting elbow to elbow with the leaders of your industry, learning the same things, hearing the same speakers, gaining the same knowledge, so that you're really on the same page with them when they're there. You're seeing the new technologies, the new advances, you're seeing the same trends. Talk to me a little bit about that. What was the genesis of that like for you to make the decision from working like a traditional recruiter, pound the phone, making 40, 50 marketing calls a day, to, this has really been your big push. And personally, I think one of the key reasons to your success.
No, good question. And I think there's probably two answers to it. The first is, if we're speaking about just the technology and the applications, and I've articulated this to people a lot over the years, they'll forget more about this stuff than I'll learn in my lifetime, right? So for me, going to the trade show specifically and seeing, the machines or the robots in action and asking questions and just being curious, it allowed me, to grasp some of that knowledge, at least so that I can bring more value if we're talking to a candidate, instead of just saying, hey, here's a link to their website, here's the job description, let me know what you think. I can reference, hey, I was just at IMTS, or I was just at Automate. They debuted this machine. It's disruptive in this way, or it's going to change the game that way. So we can bring a lot more value. Plus, I'm learning along the way. And then the other part of it too is, specifically within the automation industry, from the outside, it looks like it's this huge, thing. It's actually a very small fraternity, right? And so it's all about relationships and establishing and cultivating and maintaining those relationships. So I've made a lot of friends by, like you said, putting in the time and the effort to be, face to face and having, side conversations with them and really, feeling like we are, to your point, we are part of their organization. We're a partner to them, just not, another recruiter, another vendor.
Yeah, I walked the floor with you at IMTS a couple of weeks ago, and you're one of the mayors there. You're walking the floor, people are coming up to you. Hey, Sully, how's it going? Hey, come on by, talk to me about this. You've also not only trade shows, but go to a lot of industry conferences. Right. As a recruiter, what's the big difference between going to a trade show versus going to a conference?
A conference, for me, it's a lot more, you can be a little more personable there. It's, there's, when you go to a conference, there's no products, there's no booths. You can have, longer, deeper conversations versus, like when we were at IMTS, obviously I'm not there to recruit. It's much more of a getting caught up with the clients to see what's new, what's on the horizon, but also be respectful of their time. I'm not there to take up 30 minutes of their time. They're there obviously to generate leads and to promote their business. But like I said, it does serve, a purpose, to keep us front of mind too, with our clients. So.
Yeah, I always had a difficulty going to trade shows and wandering around. I'd go and I'd have, 15, 20, not necessarily appointment set, but people that I'd talked to before that said, yeah, feel free to stop on by, say hi. But then the rest of the time, just wandering around, I always felt bad because those people paid a lot of money to have their booth there, to bring their team there. And like you said, we weren't going to try and recruit people. We were going to learn, and we were going to develop develop our current accounts, but maybe find some new ones,
Right.
find some other companies that we could help. But they're there to sell their product. They're not there to be sold.
Mm-hmm.
And versus going to a conference, we paid the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
We're gaining the same knowledge. We are all there for a common purpose.
Yep.
To learn together, to network together, to grow together. And I just always found those to be much, much more beneficial, at least for me.
I mean, they're much more, they're traditionally the conferences, like we go to the A3 forum in Orlando, it's by far the best one every year. It's much more laid back. There's just as much, opportunity to network and to, again, establish relationships and, learn with all the keynote speakers and everything that they have there. So I think that the conferences are a little easier and a little more comfortable versus, the trade shows, traditionally. People are a little bit more inclined to talk with you, at a conference, versus the trade show. So I think there's benefits to both. You just got to be able to, you have to approach it the right way.
So what's the right way?
Well, when I started, you kind of alluded to this, I would have I didn't know anybody, right? My marching orders back in 2016 were, hey, go in as deep and as wide as you can, in this robotics and automation space. And so, I had a little list of, target companies that looked cool, and I would introduce myself and, plant a seed. So if we're at a trade show, for example, all I was really doing there was, introducing myself, finding out if there was a need, planting a seed, and then we would follow up, after, at a more appropriate time. So that was kind of the genesis, if you will. Now, if you fast forward, have those relationships established. Now it's more, essentially kind of getting caught up, with them, getting brought up to speed. Obviously, I'm a little bit more established, at this point in terms of my client base. So it's a lot of repeat and referral business, which is great. But the conversations come a little easier now, if that makes sense. So
if a recruiter's has been thinking about doing this, or they listen to the first 10 minutes of this conversation and realized your brilliance and said, this is something I should start thinking about doing. What advice would you give to them for someone just thinking about going out into the world, going and starting to attend some industry conferences?
Sure. I would say first, look at the landscape. So, if I'm recruiting for industry X, what are all of the shows, that are related to that industry? Have a little list for yourself. Research them, see who's going to be there. That's the other thing too. You go on the websites for these shows, all of the exhibitors, are going to be there, listed. So if you see names that are familiar, if you see companies that are cool that, you would like to work with, obviously highlight that, have a list to start, especially if it's your first few shows and you don't really know the lay of the land yet. Have a list, maybe even be proactive, like what we used to do a few months before the shows. We would, call, those individuals and say, hey, we saw you're going to be at, this show. This is what we do. Is it okay if we come by and say hi and, introduce ourselves? 9 times out of 10, they're going to be okay with that because, again, most of those companies, once they realize what you do, they're going to need your help, right? So I would just approach it, that way. Be very targeted, be very specific to start, and then eventually, it's just going to blossom, from there. But you got to be consistent with it, though, too.
That's the thing. It's consistent. It's a long-term investment.
Yep.
I forget who it was that I heard say it, but when you're going to attending a conference in a new industry or a new conference for you, the first year you go, you're a novelty. The second year you go, you're a family or you're a friend. The third year you go, you're part of the family.
Absolutely. I mean, I can say for myself, 2019, so my third year here, 2019 is when we started to see the fruits of all those labors. And that's when things really started to take off, not just for me, but I mean, for us as a brand in that, automation space. that's when things started to happen. And I make the joke, now I get more hugs than handshakes at these things, right? I mean, that didn't happen overnight. I mean, how can you not love this face? But yeah, it does take some time. And that was the other piece too, is you got to be consistent with it. I mean, we go to the same shows year after year, and it's just stacked. I mean, it'll be like 2 or 3 a quarter on average, I think is what we go to. But obviously we get a tremendous return, on that investment. So,
and I was thinking about it, and this is something that is, I think, very specialized to independent recruiting firms that can do something like this, because companies can't bring their HR team to these conferences. They can't bring their talent acquisition team to these conferences.
It's
because
rare. Yeah.
Not only is it rare, but I think other companies would bristle at that, because when we go to these conferences, our intent is not to find candidates for our customers.
Right.
Our intent is to build relationships with current customers and to identify new customers that we can bring a lot of value to.
Yep.
It's an inevitable byproduct that we're also going to make relationships with people who will become candidates for our customers.
Sure.
But if a talent acquisition team goes, their sole purpose is to make relationships with potential candidates. And if I were at Rockwell and Universal Robots brought their talent acquisition team, I'd be a little pissed.
Right.
So it's a unique space that we're in, an independent recruiter is in, by being able to go to these conferences. They could do a lot of good for a lot of companies.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's never, like I said, it's always been, if you approach it the right way, it's always been well received. I've never really gotten the cold shoulder from anybody.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I did, but I didn't approach it the right way. It was the first trade show I ever went to. I was probably, 27, 26. Snot-nosed little kid. I wasn't able to grow this majestic beard yet. And you're just walking around from booth to booth. Hey, Travis Miller Resource Group. I'm a recruiter. I remember I walked into one booth and he goes, I said, hey, I'm Travis Miller Resource Group. I'm a recruiter. The guy just looks at me and goes, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't quite have that experience. But again, I think, I don't remember if it was, probably was Gary, but he said, look, when you go, this is how you conduct yourself, and this is kind of the expectation, right? So we were a little bit prepared, going in. I mean, but I think back to my first show was IMTS in 2016. I had been here maybe 3 months, just figured out where the bathroom was in the building, right? But I remember going in, I was just so overwhelmed at just the scope of it, and deer in the headlights look. And it took me a minute to just kind of get my bearings. But then the other thing too that helped is I was with a colleague too, right? So that's another thing, maybe going back to being strategic about it, and being consistent. Maybe go with somebody else, right? Have somebody as your wingman as you walk around, and when you start conversations, it's a lot easier to go back and forth. So that's always been, I think, part of it too, is we go maybe in a group of 2 or a group of 3, and you can obviously cover more ground, but it makes you a little bit more comfortable too, knowing that you have somebody there. So that'd be another thing if you're a young recruiter and you're looking at kind of growing your influence, if you will, and you want to go to these shows, take a buddy along. A battle buddy. It's not going to hurt.
Yeah. So you've been to a bunch of conferences and trade shows this year. What do you see in the hiring landscape? What does it look like for the rest of 22 and into 2023?
Well, a couple of things with that. Number one, I don't see it slowing down anytime soon, unless something crazy happens, on a global scale. But all the conversations that we've had, there's really no indication that hiring is going to slow down. And I'll go back to, say, right around this time. So say end of Q3, early Q4 of 2020, right? So when things, somewhat started to open up a little bit, right, from COVID, we started getting, or at least I started getting a lot of projects coming through that were sales focused at all levels, territory, regional, whatever. And, we're doing the discovery calls. And I'm asking them, what's kind of the origin story? Why is this position open to begin with? And most of those at that time, they were newly created because what had happened, if you rewind, we all knew coming into the 2020s that it was going to be this, boom for all things automation, right? Mm-hmm. We knew it was coming. We saw the pace of hiring increasing little by little. And then COVID hit. We had a little bit of a blip in Q2 of 20. But then once we started coming out of it, what happened was a lot of people who were either, slow to adopt automation or they were resistant to it for whatever reason, because of the labor shortage and just this perfect storm situation, COVID really kind of forced their hands. They have to automate. There's no way around it anymore. And so a lot of our clients, the good ones anyway, identified that. And they're like, wow, we need to put a lot more salespeople in the field, again, to go deeper and wider with our existing customers, or maybe go after some of these target accounts now who are ripe for automation. And so we started getting all these new sales searches. And then, fast forward into 2021, those salespeople were winning all of that business. Now those clients are coming back and they're like, crap, we don't have enough engineers on the back end to design and deliver and commission, these solutions. So now we're recruiting engineers for them. Well, then their teams are doubling in size. Now you need a new manager here. You need a new director here. So if I started tracking it, right? So all of this time over this 2-year window, roughly 76% of all the positions that I have filled or I'm currently working on during that time, they're newly created. Sales, engineering, or leadership, doesn't matter. So that's one thing I see continuing into next year is just this accelerated adoption of automation, which is then in turn going to continue to create new jobs. So I see that happening. From a technology standpoint, and we saw it, last year, and I saw it this year. I think there's going to be much more continued adoption of collaborative robots, specifically cobots. Companies like UR and Yaskawa and ABB. I mean, everybody seems to have a cobot now, but I see collaborative robotics really starting, to take off even more. I see a lot more small to medium-sized businesses investing in robotics, frankly, because they have to, right? Because when I first came on, you think of a robot, you picture, a Ford plant with all these huge industrial robots all along the assembly line, right? Now, with the adoption of, the cobot, frankly, anybody, if you're a manufacturer of any size, there's a big ROI there, right? So you have the cobot market, I think, growing. I think you have companies like Formic or Rios who do more of a robot as a service type of model where somebody can literally rent a robot by the hour. I see that emerging. I see that continuing to grow. Another project that we worked on too, which kind of immersed me into AI and machine learning and deep learning. I see that continuing, to grow and evolve as well as it relates to, manufacturing and automation. I think AI is really going to be it's not just going to be a buzzword anymore. I think it's going to be much more kind of mainstream and adopted within, our space. So
how is AI being adapted into that space?
Good question. I'm probably not the best guy to answer that, but at least from what I learned, working with the company in that space, is that it's just going to, it's going to provide a lot more actionable data, actionable intelligence. Because that was, one thing when I first came on and you heard people talk about, Industry 4.0 or IIoT and, all of those, terms. Somebody put it to me this way once. They said, we're really good at collecting the data or collecting the visuals. What the hell do we do with it, right? And so I think that's going to be, part of it is I think folks are going to just have a lot more actionable intelligence in order to make decisions, which will then improve their overall processes.
You mentioned it a few minutes ago. I thought it was really interesting that you said 76% roughly of all the positions you've worked on since COVID are newly created positions. Yep. And I see the path for that in industrial technology and automation. I'm curious, you got buddies in a bunch of different industries and recruiting. Do you think that applies to to other markets, to other industries, or is that just a symptom of companies having to automate so much more with the way the world is going?
Sure. No, good question. I mean, just from my standpoint, I can't speak for other industries, but I think I couldn't think of a better space to be in right now than automation or robotics. I know I'm realistic. Nothing is essentially recession proof, but I think, automation is going to be somewhat insulated as best it can be from any type of a downturn, just because of, I said, all the labor shortage and, just the technology's emerging. I mean, somebody's probably got an idea out there right now that we don't know about, that in 2 or 3 years, it's just going to explode, right? And we'll be talking about it in this room. And that's another thing too that I think it's been cool to see as a result of the pandemic, is there's been so much more innovation and so many more cool startups that have come out. I mean, when we were all still kind of locked down, folks didn't really have a lot to do at that time, and they, were sitting back and, they had that idea in the back of their mind from when they were in college, and they just never had time to act on it. Well, this last couple of years, kind of empowered them in a sense, to invest in themselves and kind of put their idea out there and raise funding. And, you have, like I said, you have all these cool startups now, and you have all these incubators too that have popped up. Some have been around a little longer than others, but like Mass Robotics, for example, out in Boston, Boston's becoming like this really cool, it has been, but it's this really cool space for a lot of innovative things. There's obviously, spots on the West Coast too. In California, Columbus, Ohio is starting to be known as kind of the Midwest, Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of cool things going on. So I think that all too is kind of a ripple effect or a byproduct of, the pandemic, and people just, being able to act on, what they always wanted to do. Maybe they just didn't have the means or the time, but now we see it.
Well, perfect storm of being insanely difficult to hire people, so you've got all of these newly created positions, not an incredible amount of new people entering the workforce, plus more brand new companies in the last 2 years than in the previous 10 combined. What on earth can a company do to separate themselves from the pack in order to attract the best talent out there?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I would say is just be transparent. Be as
transparent
as possible throughout the process. So this was even before COVID, but one of the best examples of an interview process that we've had, it goes back, I think, to like the end of 2019. Actually, Atch and I were working on it. But the company, we introduced the candidate, and he started talking with, a couple of the members of the management team, right off the bat. And I remember debriefing with him after that first conversation, and how'd it go? And he was like, I got to tell you, he said, obviously this wasn't my first interview ever. He's like, I've had a few, but this is the first time that I felt like it wasn't an interview. It was like more of a strategic planning session. I already had the job. I was already part of the team, and we were putting together our plans for the next year and kind of our goals and things like that. And that really just kind of set the tone for the whole process. So they were transparent, from the beginning. He was, obviously it was not a reckless pace in terms of speed, but it was pretty fast. That's another thing too right now is, companies that are winning the war on talent, they got rid of those long, laborious, you got to talk to, 18 people over, 8 different, interviews. Now we're seeing, much more concise and, I guess strategic conversations when it comes to, hiring, because candidates right now, they have options. They have a ton of options, and they know that. And so companies that are essentially fastest to offer in most cases are going to win right now. So being transparent, being aggressive, but not reckless in terms of the speed and the cadence. I mean, not having it drawn out and not having them jump through too many hoops, those are the folks that are winning right now.
What else are they doing to set themselves apart? Because it can't be just speed,
Right.
because speed could be a good thing or a bad thing. Someone could very quickly realize this isn't a company that I want to work for.
Right. No, good question. I think that, I think there's another part too, especially with, the younger workforce, the millennials, their mindset is, it's not like maybe when we were growing up where it was.
Dude, we're millennials.
Yeah, Jay.
Barely, but we are.
I almost missed it, but I think Jake Call put something out earlier this week about it, but it basically was an image of like a baby boomer generation, salary and title, right? That's what was important. And then he had, an image below that with our generation where, salary was just a small little portion, the title was just a small little piece of the pie, but then it was, flexibility, mental health, free time. There's all these other factors that are important, right, to a younger workforce. And so taking that into account, I think companies, are realizing that, either if it's possible, a fully remote or some type of hybrid, work situation, it needs to be there. And I get it. Not every position and not every company is set up for that. But companies that at least can offer some flexibility now. Obviously, compensation is always going to be important. If you can't compete with, bigger firms in terms of dollars and cents, I'm seeing companies that are getting creative on the back end, maybe unlimited PTO. Maybe if they can't throw all the eggs in the salary basket, maybe they're covering more of the health insurance premiums, right? So you're netting, more of what you're making in terms of the check. Like I said, that's really what I'm seeing, at least with the small to medium-sized companies. They're having to get creative. The environment, the culture is extremely important just to everybody, but especially, a younger, worker. I mean, there's nothing worse than when your alarm goes off in the morning and you're not looking forward to where you're going. It's a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
So being able to, have a culture where, everybody's voice is heard. You empower your employees. That's what people are looking for. That's what they're attracted to right now, above and beyond just the dollars and a title.
Yeah. It's hard though, because all of the stuff that's not compensation is incredibly important. But this is the old saying, sometimes the most important things are the hardest to measure.
Exactly.
And money's super easy to measure. You either are offering more or you're offering less.
Yep.
And so how does a company actively sell those things that aren't compensation? They sell the vision of the future. They see the potential. They show the great work that somebody is going to be able to do. They showcase the culture that really values their employees. How do they do all of those things so that they can compete with a lot of these bigger companies that are capable of offering the easiest thing to measure, which is more money?
Sure. No, well, I think you said it. You got to show it, right? Social media makes that really easy. You can, film a 5-minute clip, of a company party or a company event, edit it out, put that out on LinkedIn, put it out on, Facebook, whatever means you want, but you have to be able to show it. And I think especially with, small to medium-sized companies, that gives them a much more fighting chance to attract talent, because they're kind of opening up themselves to the world, right? And they're saying, hey, we might not be one of the top 5 largest companies in the world, but we do some really cool stuff here and we have fun along the way. Here's a clip of how we do it. And that seems to resonate more with people.
It's tough too, because you have to have the culture of people that want to share it. They're proud of it. Because if marketing goes out to the team and says, all right, we expect everyone to have at least 5 Instagram posts per month and 10 LinkedIn posts per month showcasing our culture,
Right.
people are going to roll their eyes and they're going to say, not this shit again. But I think if you create an environment where you value your employees and you get them excited about the company, the vision, the future,
Yep.
then they get excited about doing it.
And be genuine about it too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, you how you are in those clips should be exactly how you are if that person comes in to interview with you. You have to be the exact same person, right? So whether that's good or bad, but you can't be acting if you're going to put yourself out there like that. You got to be real.
So again, like the trade show or like the industry conference thing, this is a long-term investment.
Right.
This is something that you can't turn on tomorrow and say and differentiate yourself from the other companies out there. But that's the really hard part is the market is so tight right now that people need to hire now and they need to hire great people now. But what we're talking about, it's a long-term investment. I'm scared that I know the answer, but is there anything a company can do right now other than pay somebody more dollars if they haven't invested in creating an environment, values the employees, and the employees showcase that? If they haven't already started to make that investment to differentiate their employment brand,
Right.
short of paying more dollars, is there anything they can do in this current market to differentiate themselves from their competitors to get great talent on board?
That's a good one. I mean, if you're on the cusp of introducing a new solution or some new technology that you've already been working on and you bring that to the forefront, but even then, it's
got to be people that are excited about the new technology. I hate to say it and shameless plug, but I think if you're in that situation where you can't offer significantly more dollars than your competitors and you haven't already started to build an employment brand that differentiates yourself as a destination employer, a great place to come and work, a company that has a great vision, that is a place that values their employees. And you might already have that, but if you haven't started to showcase that message, that takes a long time. I hate to say it, but I think the best thing you can do is hire a recruiter.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be Miller Resource Group. Find a search firm that you connect with, that you like them, they like you. You can get them excited about the vision for your company. And then they can go out and be that third party.
Right.
They take the place of your employees being that third party advocate as a great place to work, because then they can hear your story. Got to have a good story. You got to have a good vision. You got to have an exciting opportunity, good story to tell, place that people want to go and work. But if you can get that recruiter excited about it,
Sure.
and they can go out and be your ambassador, they can evangelize your message out there in the marketplace. I think that's the only way right now. You can either pay dollars, you can have already established an employment brand as a destination spot to go and work, or you can hire somebody to go tell that story for you.
Right.
Can you think of any other options?
No. I mean, you think about how many great companies that are out there that nobody even knows about, right? And it takes somebody like us to be able to advocate for that company to the market and tell their story and get somebody from interested to excited, right? So, and that's, that's really, I tell people that all the time in terms of, interacting with, with candidates. I mean, I'm realistic. I'm not the only guy that's, sending them, a message about, this opportunity or that opportunity. But, again, in terms of the messaging, take the insights from the client, take some of those exciting nuggets, what separates them or what they think separates them, put that into your messaging. And then your sole goal is to get that person from interested to excited. But you have to be equipped with enough ammunition to get them excited in order to make that introduction and then just kind of see where it goes. So like you were talking about, the company has to be able to articulate that to you up front, because you got a whole nother set of problems if, you're having a discovery call with a company and, hey, what's the best part of working here? And they don't know, right? Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother set of problems. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, the ability to articulate your story. And that's a good piece of advice for people in a hiring position out there. If you are looking for a recruiter and they don't ask you questions about that, mm-hmm. if all they're asking you about is what are the requirements for somebody to come and work here?
Right.
Give me the job description. Tell me a resume. Talk to me about what's a good resume that's going to match that job description. Mm-hmm. Great. I will go out and find you people who have the resume that matches your job description.
Right.
If they're not asking you questions about the future, about the culture, about why somebody should get excited to come and work there, mm-hmm. run from that recruiter, because they are not going to be able to attract the best and brightest. They're going to be able to attract the people that can do the job and need a job to do right now.
The question that I use along those lines that I find very impactful is, you're talking to the hiring authority, tell me something that's like a must-have or a nice-to-have that's not on this job description, mm-hmm. or that's not on your website. Because any candidate can get information from the job description or the website or YouTube videos or whatever. That's all information. I want insights from the company that I can then share with the candidate that's just going to, totally blow their mind. Because if it's not, if it's not on the job description or the website and we don't know about it, then we're not really bringing a lot of value either. Because we're just pushing the job description. Hey, take a look at this. Let me know what you think. Mm-hmm. Right. So if we can get insights from the company, be able to relay that to the candidate, that brings a whole nother level of value to the conversation.
Mm-hmm. So what should a candidate be doing? Somebody's out there looking for a new position, or somebody reaches out to them about a new position. Mm-hmm. What are the things that they should be doing to dig in beyond the actual work?
Sure.
So they're interviewing for a job. They know they can do the job. They've uncovered that. What are the questions they should be having, conversations they should be having with people at the company to determine whether this is their next job, mm-hmm. or their career?
Sure. No, good question. I think number one, I think that person needs to be honest with themselves first and foremost. Obviously, always look in the mirror, right? But if you're engaging with people at the company at different levels, I would dig in on, some of the, I don't want to say the warm and fuzzies, but, what attracted you to the company, right? What do you like most about it? And then on the flip side, what are some areas of opportunity mm-hmm. that you see? What are some challenges? We all know everything's not going to be roses and sunshine mm-hmm. all the time. Every company is going to have a wart here or there. So don't be afraid. If you're a candidate, don't be afraid to dig in and ask about those warts too. Mm-hmm. You don't want to necessarily go in just, with blinders on, but ask some of those tough questions too, because again, there's going to be nothing worse 6 months in and you're like, crap, I didn't realize it was like this here. And you're regretting your decision, right? Mm-hmm. But if you ask questions about the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think you're going to be much more comfortable with your decision because you left it all on the table. Mm-hmm. So.
Curious, what are some of the warts of working here at Miller Resource Group?
Oh, there's no warts here, Travis. It's a great
place. It's all roses and sunshine. We're the only company on the whole damn planet.
Yes, exactly.
No, I'm serious, man. So, been here over 6 years. You're successful. You're doing tremendously well. Mm-hmm. We love having you here, and I think you love being here. Mm-hmm. But there's got to be some challenges working here. There's challenges working at any company.
Well, I think the obvious one is, we're a small firm, right? So everybody has to be comfortable wearing a couple of different hats, mm-hmm. I think. But there are some limitations really with that. I think that what we've done though good as a group is, you and Gary have done a really good job in kind of setting the tone in terms of the culture, but you give us the autonomy to kind of self-police in mm-hmm. a sense. And I've told you this before, there's a lot of conversations behind the scenes that go down where, things get addressed and you guys never even hear about it. Right. So I think that probably not the answer to your question, but I think that, again, it's an example of being able to empower, your employees and giving them a fair amount of autonomy, to kind of, squash things if something were to pop off. And that way it doesn't fester, right? Because when you have a small group like this, if there's something underlying and nobody's talking about it and it's just festering, it's not a good situation.
Yeah. Well, appreciate that. Appreciate the honesty. Last question for any newbies out there, somebody just getting started in the recruiting business or somebody thinking about getting into this business. What would be your one piece of advice for that person getting started?
I would say always remember to follow the golden rule, and what I mean by that is put yourself on the other side of the phone or on the other side of the screen. And how would you want that interaction to go? How would you want the communication to flow? Always kind of put yourself in another person's, situation, especially with, if you're dealing with a candidate, it's going to impact not only them, but, their families. And so always be mindful that it's not just about that person. There are other stakeholders in play. On the company side, a bad hire can sometimes be catastrophic. It can cost them business. They can lose money. They can lose customers. There's any number of things that can happen if you have a bad hire. So don't just take that job description at face value. Dig in and ask those follow-up and follow-up and follow-up questions so that, again, you have information, but then you also have insights that you can share with candidates.
Well, it sucks. Your advice is to follow up and follow up and follow up, and I don't have any more follow up. So, Sully, again, thanks for coming in and talking to me today.
Thanks
really appreciate it. It was a good time. And everybody, thanks for listening. Appreciate it. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you liked it and you wanted to leave us a little review and 5-star ranking, well, we'd appreciate it.
We'd take it.
All right, the podcast. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Deuces.